in, but welcome. This is our Reclaiming Democracy course. Like I said, this is the first class in a four-part series that we're doing about how to reclaim our democracy. And so, yeah, I am Andrea, she, her pronouns. I've been with March on Harrisburg for 3 years now, almost 3 years, which is crazy to say. And a lot of what I do at March in Harrisburg is I focus on base building, outreach, lots of community organizing work, along with social media and communications. I think let's get started. Let's go to the next slide here. So who we are. So some folks on here I recognize, and some people know who March on Harrisburg is, but it's always good to just do a little recap. So March on Harrisburg is a grassroots movement of everyday folks that are fighting to end political corruption in Pennsylvania and build a democracy that works for all of us, not just a wealthy, few people, right? And we are very much committed to a future where regular people govern, we can meet our collective needs, and we can thrive, right? We fight to get money out of politics so we can build a world that is not hard to live in, right? We are fighting to get money out of politics so life can be easy, because we know that it can be, right? We are mainly comprised of volunteers, very much volunteer driven. We're statewide, which means that we do stuff in person and online. We have folks all across the state, from Erie to Philly to Lancaster to Scranton, right? We're all across the state. And we are politically independent. This is really important one, which means we hold everybody in power accountable. We are not beholden to either party, and we are very much focused on systemic change. And just want to also say this, tonight's going to be new for a lot of us. Maybe for some of us, it's going to be a repeat. But I just want to say this. I remember 3 years ago, like, all of this stuff that we're going to talk about tonight was new to me. I never knew how a bill became law before March in Harrisburg. I did not know what a committee was. I knew corruption was in our political system, right? But I didn't really know the different channels and ways it flows into it, right? But I had no idea. There's so many things I didn't know. And so I just want to make that statement that, like, it has taken time to learn this stuff, but we are still, I'm still learning new stuff every day. And the kind of the core idea of why I'm saying this is, like, we deserve to know that this stuff, this information, because it impacts us, right? And there's going to be several points tonight where you all will be able to ask questions, and feel free in the chat to put stuff in the chat in the meantime as well. Sorry, Haley, I'll pass it to you. I just wanted to make that disclaimer. Yeah.
So I'm Haley. I've been with March on Harrisburg for close to half a year. I will be the other person teaching this class today. So our course outline, these upcoming courses will be taught by different people and some of the organizations we're partnered with to get a well-rounded perspective from the different organizations working in PA and nationally. So today we're going to do an overview of money in politics. Next week, we're going to go over stopping secret spending in elections. And then next month, we're going to have classes on banning gifts to PA legislators and breaking the campaign cash machine. Next slide. All right, so today we will learn the history of money in politics, both nationally and within PA, how the ruling class buys public power, how money influences politics, and the way our legislators are legally bribed, how this affects us, and covering March on Harrisburg's policy platform in response to corruption. And again, I know some people just hopped in, but make sure that as you're coming in, you're muting yourself. After each section, there will be about 5 sections, we will take time to ask questions. So if you have any questions for each section, save them to the end. We'll have a moment for you to ask. So how we got here. Next slide, please. So the master plan, which if you want to listen to the podcast called The Master Plan, it goes much more into detail. So I'll give you a quick rundown. So this is more corruption on a national level. In the 1970s, Lewis Powell, a soon-to-be Supreme Court justice, wrote the Powell Memorandum. This memo outlined his goal for the political right to gain power to benefit businesses. believing that businesses should have more of a say in politics. This laid the foundation for businesses to have more power in politics, mainly through legalizing corruption through the justice system. So as stated, the Powell Memo was published in 1971. It gained a lot of popularity with bosses of business. Basically, businesses would sue at the state level, argue their case, and lose. They would then appeal to the Supreme Court, where Powell, in favor of business, held the power to sway decisions and pass into law questionable decisions. For example, in 1976, Buckley v. Valeo was appealed to the Supreme Court. After Watergate, Congress was restricting campaign contributions to candidates through the Federal Election Campaign Act of 1971. A limit was set for how much an individual could contribute to a single campaign. The question was posed, does this act violate First Amendment rights? At the state level, they said no, but the Supreme Court decided it was, claiming that an individual spending as much as they wanted on a campaign did not have the potential to corrupt politicians. This case solidified the protection of money as speech. Then, in 1978, a similar case was taken to the state level in First National Bank of Boston versus Bellotti. It lost at the state level and was appealed to the Supreme Court. 2 banks and 3 corporations wanted to spend money to run smear campaigns on their opposition. It was, at the time, illegal to use campaign contributions to influence the outcome of a vote. The question asked was, again, a matter of First Amendment rights to speech. The Supreme Court agreed that the right to influence the outcomes of elections was one of the primary rights of the First Amendment. The first case in 1976 influenced the outcome of the second case and allowed corporations to spend as much as they wanted to promote or oppose a candidate through advertisement to influence votes. Finally, the notorious Citizens United case, formerly known as Citizens United versus FEC, or the Federal Election Commission. This case ruled that political spending is a form of free speech protected by the First Amendment, allowing for unlimited campaign contributions to support political candidates. In 2002, Congress passed the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, also known as the McCain-Feingold Act, after the 2 sponsors, John McCain and Russ Feingold. This act prevented corporations from funding any media that referred to a candidate within 60 days before a general election and 30 days before the primary election. In 2008, we're still on the same slide, I'm sorry. In 2008, Citizens United, a nonprofit organization, wanted to broadcast a movie they were making about Hillary Clinton, which would be highly critical of her and would air during the time she was running for president. This would be prohibited by the BCRA, the act that we were just talking about. So Citizens United went to court with the FEC, claiming the BCRA violated their First Amendment right to free speech. The district court ruled against Citizens United, citing a different decision that argued the same thing and lost. The Supreme Court, however, ruled that it was free speech and removed limitations on corporate funding. What's important to know is that Citizens United essentially granted personhood to corporations, but more important, it created what we know today as dark money, which will be discussed more later. But because corporations had to disclose their spending, they were able to hide their spending through nonprofits, which take public donations, are tax exempt, and do not have to disclose donor identities. The Citizens United case also created super PACs, which allow unlimited campaign contributions from special interest groups. Next slide. Sorry. So now that we got through the justice system and how we came to legalize corruption, how did this happen in the first place? Do you remember the Powell Memo? It inspired how corporations would gain power, targeting education, media, and the judiciary, also with the aim of influencing the executive and legislative branch, as we see with lobbying today. First, the Federalist Society recruited conservative law students, teaching them the importance of being business-friendly and creating a bias within the judicial system. Brett Kavanaugh and John Robert, who voted yes in the Citizens United case, by the way, were Supreme Court justices who were part of the Federalist Society. Also, Joseph Coors of beer fame learned about the Powell Memo and, being a rich man who hated the world for disliking him for being rich, wanted to change that public perception. He financially backed the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank that is responsible for writing Project 2025, but he also launched TVN, which broadcasted right-wing sentiments and pro-business values. It only lasted 2 years, but the creators revived it into what is now known as Fox News. Finally, these new lawyers would replace conservative judges who were upholding campaign finance laws. With Powell and Roberts on the Supreme Court, pro-business decisions were passed into law. All this combined caused the outrageous campaign spending we see today, where special interests can buy our politicians and essentially buy votes. The candidate with the most money wins. We can see from this chart that since Citizens United, spending has skyrocketed. Even between 2010, when it was passed, and the 2012 election, we saw a nearly 15% increase in campaign spending. Next slide. A study done by Princeton measured how much public opinion affects policy. Ideally, the more support a bill has, the more likely it should become a law, shown with the black line. The actual representation for the majority of the population is stagnant at 30%, meaning whether we oppose or support something, our odds of it being passed do not change. As the researchers state, the preferences of the average American appear to have only a minuscule, near zero, statistically non-significant impact upon public policy. We can see how much different industries have spent to influence government in the last 10 years. And when we look at their representation on the chart, the elite representation, it is much closer to the ideal, proving that we have no influence over our policy, but corporations do. Do we have any questions on that section of?
I do want to name, so I see Christine, you put in the chat that you can't see the slides. Can everybody else see the slides right now? Just want to ask that. Christine, I'm not sure how you joined. Sometimes if you're joining on like a phone or something like that, it's easier to jump off and then come back onto the Zoom.
Okay, I'll do that. I'm on the computer. I'll jump back on.
Sounds good. Awesome. See you in a second. But I guess we can take it to the next slide here. I think this is fine. Cool. Awesome. Thanks for guiding us through that section, Haley. And I just want to add that I did pop in the chat a link to Master Plan, which is a phenomenal podcast that is hosted by David Sirota. And he does just a really great job of kind of tracing the corporate takeover of government back right to like the 70s in much more detail, which is where we pulled our info from for today. So yeah, just wanted to add that. We'll send it in a link after today as well, but it's a great podcast. But yeah, so you don't have to look nationally to see political corruption, right? Pennsylvania has a long and complex history of money influencing politics, right? We're characterized as a state by like really lax campaign finance laws, kind of this entrenched tradition of gift giving to legislators. Pay to play is really a part of our political history, right? Corruption is not new here. It's really part of Pennsylvania's political DNA. And there's a quote here on the screen from Alexander Hamilton himself. And this is what he said after he visited Pennsylvania, and he was pretty disgusted by what he saw happening in our government, the corruption happening in our government. And he goes, "The political putrefaction of Pennsylvania politics is greater than I had any idea of." And so just moving on to the next slide here. Oh, all good. Well, everyone's getting a sneak peek of the rest of the presentation. But yeah, this is one more over. Yeah. So Thomas Scott. So basically, during the Gilded Age, railroad and coal interests were the ones running the show. They wielded enormous power in Harrisburg through direct and indirect financial influence over legislators. Do people here know who Thomas Scott was? Any chance? So Thomas Scott was the president of the Pennsylvania Railroad from, I think, 1874, 73 to 1880. And at the time, the Pennsylvania Railroad is the largest and most powerful corporation in the country. And Thomas Scott earned the nickname the 51st Senator due to basically his overwhelming influence over Congress, particularly U.S. senators from Pennsylvania and just also over, states with railroad interests. And railroad interests really dominated state policy. Under his leadership, the Pennsylvania Railroad effectively dictated legislation in Harrisburg. Laws were passed to benefit railroad expansion, right? Suppress regulation, suppress worker rights laws, protect corporate profits and increase them. And there was also a common phrase used at the time that was called scot-free, which meant that something could pass into law because Scott approved. And just moving on to the next slide here, Thomas Scott was incredibly anti-worker, incredibly anti-union. He was a fierce, fierce opponent of labor organizing. And as president, under his tenure, the Pennsylvania Railroad refused to recognize unions. And they really spent a lot of time crushing early attempts at worker solidarity. In 1877, during the Great Railroad Strike, workers walked off the job in response to basically Thomas Scott slashing wages multiple times, while at this time, right, the profits of Scott and other people is increasing, and just of the railroad in general. And in response to the striking, Thomas Scott called for violence and very infamously said that strikers deserved a rifle diet for a few days and to see how they like that kind of bread, in response to people asking for an increase in wages so they could have bread on the table, have food. So that's just really good indication kind of the political corruption in Pennsylvania and just some of the tangible kind of consequences of it. So going on to the next slide here. So we're going to go on to the next section, but before then, does anyone have any questions? We can take like a couple, or if people want to put anything in the chat and ask. If not, we'll keep going. Well, I guess we'll keep going. So next section is going to be the commodification of public policy. And, we're going to be covering basically how the ruling class buys power. So just keep that concept in mind as we go through this section. But first, we're going to do a quick poll. So who is the ruling class? What pops in y'all's minds when you hear that term? We're going to launch a little poll and it'll come up and you can write a short answer in. Don't think too hard about it. Just first thing that pops into your mind. Give it a few seconds for some more people to answer. Give it like a minute and then we'll close the poll. All right, let's share the results. What did people say? Oh, view details. Are we able to share the results on here? I don't know if we are. Well, I'll just.
I shared the results. I don't know who's getting the results.
I see. Well, I can just read some of them out. So some people put on here banks and major corporations. Somebody said the rich. Somebody here said the rich and powerful, richest people, oligarchs, those who have power over others financially, C-suite business people, billionaires, the wealthy and the politicians, the ones with money. Yes, yes. All of these responses are great examples of the ruling class. So we go into the next slide here. Seth, are you able to pop it to them? Awesome. Thank you. But yeah, so all of those responses, great examples of the ruling class, right? Really rich people, billionaires, people who own large shares of companies, right? It's the small group of people who own really the vast majority of land, of resources. They control the means of economic production. These are the people who have the pockets to buy our political process, right? Which we'll get more into later. And I want to add to that, they don't need to hold office to shape decisions, right? They control the levers of influence that guide politicians and institutions, right? Politicians can be part of the ruling class, and in many instances they are, or they eventually do because they spin through the revolving door. But mainly, politicians are kind of these power executors who make and implement the laws that the ruling class wants. I really want to just emphasize that point tonight, that the ruling class does not need to hold office to shape decisions because of money in politics. And then on the right there, there's a nice chart, if you go back, that just shows the combined wealth of America's top 20 billionaires. And there's lots of people on there who we unfortunately recognize. $2.7 trillion. 20 people have amassed that much money. Going to the next slide here. So defining money in politics, right? So money in politics is basically how people with money buy the political power they need to then pass laws to then make themselves more money, right? The way that we kind of think of money in politics in March and Harrisburg is it's the tool of the ruling class. It's the instrument of the billionaires, right? This tweet here really exemplifies this commodification of public policy and just our government, right? It's a great quote by the Hampton Institute that says that everything becomes a commodity under capitalism, including the government. Politicians are commodities bought and sold by capitalists. Legislation is a commodity bought and sold by lobbyists who are employed by capitalists. Politicians from both parties represent capital, not people. Right? And so kind of it just boils down to this question, right? Do our legislators prioritize us? Do they work for us? And the answer is no, right? Our legislators work and prioritize the ruling class, the people with money. Politicians are this visible face of governance, right? But they are constrained and directed by the interests of wealthy people, right? And this is because we live in a world where campaigns are expensive and reliant on wealthy donors, which we'll get into in the next section. But we can see the output of this question, right? Do our legislators work for us? Pretty clearly in this chart here. This is a chart from an analysis that was done by our allies in the Pennsylvania Poor People's Campaign. And a group of them studied hundreds of bills that were passed in the 2021-2022 legislative session in Pennsylvania, and basically found that only 18% of bills helped everyday people. Only 18%. They found that the majority of bills passed are things like bridge namers or, small insignificant things like changing the business code. Our legislature spends an absurd amount of time, right, debating things like what's the state candy of Pennsylvania? And they even made a commission to debate the state song, I believe. Right. So you think about kind of the struggle that a lot of us the crisis a lot of us in the state are facing, right? Minimum wage, still $7.25 an hour, right? Medicaid being cut for hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people, right? Our roads, there's so many potholes in them, right? There's so many kind of significant things that we need fixed. And our full-time legislature, they prioritize stuff that just doesn't impact us. It doesn't benefit us. And what do they produce for us, right? Only 18.2% of bills that help us. So something to keep in mind, right? As we're thinking about the legislature and how change happens. Going to the next slide here, passed over to Haley.
Yeah, and before we move on, does anyone have any questions about that section? All right, nothing.
In the chat too, as well.
Feel free to put in the chat. So we're going to go over how money buys our democracy. There are 5 ways to bribe a legislator legally. They can be given gifts, unlimited campaign contributions, a revolving door where they can be guaranteed a lucrative lobbyist job from their lobbyist friends after their term is over, through side jobs where they work in a sector that is a conflict of interest and prevents them from fully focusing on being a representative, and through dark money, undisclosed, unreported spending.
Gifts. Oh, gifts. So in Pennsylvania, it's fully legal for billionaire, lobbyist, rich person to bribe legislators with gifts of any kind. You can see on the right here on the screen, these are some of the examples: wining and dining, sports tickets, vacations, cash. Yes, cash is legally allowed to be gifted. Concerts, Super Bowl tickets, right? Penn State box seats. All of this is legal in Pennsylvania. We're one of three states without any form of a gift ban. Three states. 47 other states have figured it out. We're one of three states without one. And just to add to, so on the left there, you can see some skill games company. They took Pennsylvania lawmakers to the rodeo in Wyoming. I'm sure legislators had a great time there. These kinds of gifts are normal in Harrisburg. And we get glimpses of the kinds of gifts every time, like I said, Super Bowl tickets, or they go to the rodeo in Wyoming. But really 97% of gifts go unreported. So we only really see 3% of what's actually going on, and the gifts are absurd and frustrating and disgusting, but 97% of them go unreported.
So campaign contributions are, thanks to Citizens United, unlimited. Although they do need to be disclosed, they can easily hide the spending through nonprofits, donations, PACs and super PACs, and other dark money schemes. This makes it hard to follow the money and accuse legislators of having a conflict of interest or making decisions based on who pays them. Campaign contributions create an environment where even the most well-meaning politicians become corrupted because you only succeed if you have a lot of money. Politicians become more concerned with how much they can get in donations for their campaign and very little about what campaign they're running on. We saw this with the Harris-Walz campaign, which made over $1 billion in 3 months, a historic amount of money, while being criticized for not having a campaign plan on their site. It has become a race for funding that we, the people, cannot participate in. It was a record year this last election in campaign funding for both parties, including Elon Musk's spending alone on the Trump administration, showing that all they care about is who can rake in more money. And yet, we are still asked for donations, as we were after the Democrats lost, despite their $1 billion collection. Why should we donate when neither party represents us? If $1 is one vote, my $5 isn't getting me very far.
The revolving door. So yeah, the revolving door is basically when politicians will leave their job as a public servant to then work for the private sector as a lobbyist. And a lot of times they work in the industry that they were regulating before. And a lot of times what the ruling class will do, what a billionaire will do, lobbyists will do, is offer a current politician or maybe one of their staff members a future job in the private sector in exchange for them passing or maybe not passing a policy now. Some examples of the revolving door in Pennsylvania, and you can see on the screen there. So former Governor Tom Wolf's top health secretary abruptly resigned to become the top lobbyist for UPMC, right? Was one of the leading people when it comes to healthcare policy in the state, suddenly resigns and becomes a lobbyist, top lobbyist for UPMC, right? And it's no surprise, right, that like Medicaid is not being expanded in Pennsylvania, right? In fact, it's actually being cut for hundreds and thousands of people over the course. It's been unwinding since after the pandemic for a while. And it's no surprise considering that there's a revolving door and people spin through it quite fast.
All right, so side jobs. And also, Andrea, I think you'd be better at answering the question in the chat if you'd like to respond to that.
Yes, I'm going to actually put a link to something in the chat for you, Carol, that will answer that question.
Perfect. So side jobs are jobs that politicians can hold while in office. These are often a conflict of interest, like Jean Yaw, who is a PA senator on the Environmental Resources and Energy Committee, but is also a practicing attorney for gas companies. So while he's helping gas companies pollute our planet, he's also managing our environmental resources and energy. So if green energy were to be voted on, do we think this senator would betray his gas company friends or the people he represents? Half of the states banned secondary employment. PA is the third highest paid legislator in the country with an annual salary of $102,000. But with other benefits like gifts, their total contribution likely puts PA at the top. They are paid twice the average of all US legislators. Why would they need to make money on the side? More than 40 lawmakers earn passive incomes as landlords and then vote on legislation that affects renters. Would they vote for something that benefits the people or something that makes them more money as a landlord? Our majority chair of the Senate Urban Affairs and Housing Committee, Senator Frank Ferry, works 4 jobs. He's a senator, attorney, fire chief, and a rental property owner. That's right. The person in charge of housing owns rental properties. Other suspicious jobs include former Senator Jake Gorman, serving on the board of directors of a bank, and former Representative Mike Terzai, who worked at law firms that represented Fortune 500 companies. And after his term was over, he was appointed as the general counsel of People's Natural Gas Company, which is another example of the revolving door. Lawmakers,
sorry. I was going to say, I just want to add to like, we don't, sometimes legislators have side jobs that are like, nobody cares about, right? Like we don't care about if you're a Sunday school teacher, right? We care about if you like, you know, Haley, you really eloquently said, right, you're an attorney for a Fortune 500 company. So just want to add that too, right? Some legislators will be like, oh, I'm a side job as a Sunday school teacher. Nobody cares about that. Or if you're
benefit the community. But if you're you have a direct conflict of interest, there's nothing that prevents you from doing that. And lawmakers do not have to report how much they make on the side, which could indicate whether a policy decision that they voted on benefited them financially or not. So we'll never know.
Oh gosh, the side jobs gets me every time. It's just incredibly infuriating because it's just the contrast is crazy. Especially considering our legislature is full time and how well they're paid. But yeah, so dark money. This is one of the last ways we'll cover of how to legally bribe a Pennsylvania legislator. Dark money basically refers to political spending by groups that do not disclose their donors, basically allowing wealthy individuals or organizations to secretly fund ads and campaigns to influence without accountability. And we tend to see this show up in our mailboxes, especially like around election season. You'll see a pamphlet that says something like Pennsylvania is for Pennsylvania, or a lot of those kind of nasty ads that we'd see on like YouTube in the past election. Those are funded by dark money. Craig Holman, who's a campaign finance expert, describes dark money as the ideal cloak and dagger cover where no one knows where the money is coming from or where it is going. So yeah, all of those toxic ads that all of us are pretty sick of, dark money. And I also wanted to say this is a really beloved tool by the ruling class because again, wealthy people can hide behind or can hide their influence on policy and they can remain in the shadows and anonymous. So yeah, next slide.
All right, so we're going to go over how political corruption impacts us, we the people. So the most pressing effects of corruption are a direct result of poor policy and a greater divide in wealth inequality. We are seeing higher levels of homelessness with no solutions, increases in drug use with no support systems, and an overall increase in trauma. We are seeing increases in natural disasters due to pollution and destroyed ecosystems, as well as global warming. Increases in fires, flooding, and hurricanes are all linked to ecological damage or global warming, both caused by politicians passing policies that protect corporations responsible for pollution while deregulating protections for wildlife. We are seeing continued senseless wars as far back as Vietnam, meant to maintain US imperialism and extract resources that have destroyed the global South and the Middle East, like the drilling of oil in the Middle East, or slavery in the Congo to produce cobalt, which is what our lithium batteries run on for our electric vehicles, our phones, everything. And I think I'm still on last slide. I'm so sorry. And there are preventable deaths caused by disease, climate, financial burdens, violence, or pollution. People cannot afford medical treatment, prescriptions, or surgeries. They are displaced due to climate catastrophes or killed because of them. They are pushed into homelessness where they risk death from exposure or illness because they cannot afford care. Violence increases in traumatic environments, killing women and children from domestic violence and others in street violence in impoverished areas. Pollution is making people sick from the water they drink and the food they eat, and nobody is protecting them from this preventable harm. And then the tweet, Jason Hickel has a lot of great takes on all of this. He said, "What's striking about capitalist civilization is that it has no real direction. There's no vision for social progress, no commitment to improving human welfare or ecology. All we get is the chaos of profit-oriented production and accumulation as the world burns around us." Right, so the root causes of poverty. Willie Baptist, who wrote "It's Not Enough to Be Angry," said, "We don't need charity or food banks to care for the poor if poverty is eradicated at the root of its cause." If we had all the resources we needed, we wouldn't need to rely on charity. We need to eradicate poverty at its root. And the root is our government allowing and benefiting from corporations hoarding wealth and creating false scarcity. By hoarding wealth and keeping us poor, they continue to oppress us and keep us down. They create fake problems to blame, like immigration, instead of us blaming them, so we won't come together and fight for a better life without their control over us. And this tweet, I love it. "Attacking the rich is not envy, it's self-defense. The hoarding of wealth is the cause of poverty. The rich aren't just indifferent to poverty, they create and maintain it." So how do they steal the wealth of our labor and leave us scraps? We create wealth through our labor. We're going to do some quick math, so follow along. If you work 8 hours a day and make $5 an hour, you go home with $40 a day. If your labor produces value worth $140, after the boss pays you your 40, they pocket $100. This is how it used to look once upon a time. However, as you can see from this chart, productivity has increased a lot in a short time. Productivity is the blue line. The gray line is our wages, which have barely kept up with inflation and practically stagnate. The response to the chart, when asked why workers don't get the full benefit of rising productivity and that no one has good answers, is funny because Marx, 150 years ago, did. He believed that capitalism would produce so much productivity thanks to constant incentive to innovate, to stay competitive, that eventually we would be so productive that we wouldn't have to work as much and not lose out on pay and still maintain a functioning society. However, capitalists, aka our corporate overlords, are stealing the extra wealth we create in profits. Remember the math we did earlier? Let's say now you earn $50 a day instead of 40. But because of automation and technology, it takes you a lot less time to complete your task. Resources are also sourced from the cheapest supplier, cutting down costs for your boss. So you're making a cheaper product maybe 5 times as fast as you used to. So now you create wealth through your labor worth around $1,000 a day. That surplus value is taken by your boss, not redistributed to you in either more money or less hours, and hoarded. That's them taking $950 of your worth you create and only giving you $50. And we agree to that. As we become more industrious and productive, they make more profit. But without us, they have nothing. So how are we trapped in this system? They keep us trapped in the system where we accept low wages while they rake in all this money from our labor. There are several contributing factors. First, debt. If we owe someone like a school, hospital, or bank, then we need to keep working to pay it back. We also believe in rugged individualism, that our success comes from hard work and we can do anything if we work hard enough. This is a lie that makes us work harder with little to no reward unquestioningly, and also prevents us from wanting to support policies that benefit the whole community. Sorry, I lost this one. Like free healthcare or housing the unhoused. Sorry, we're still back at the other slide. Also, our economy is dependent on the stock market, which is essentially whether businesses are doing well or not. And when business isn't booming, we all suffer. And so we have a vested interest in maintaining their power and control of the market. Our voting system is also unrepresentative. We have very little impact on elections, and because of the way we vote, which is very little and some of us only in big elections, we are disconnected from politics. We can't vote out legislators that aren't doing their job. We barely affect who gets elected. And by voting so little, we don't get involved in change because we don't believe it counts. Wage labor is a big one. We need to work to afford to live. There is no alternative. So we work whatever job we can. Therefore, we put up with any conditions we work in because we've normalized working most of our lives and fear losing our job. Policing is also oppressive in America. If we oppose the system, if we challenge the status quo that keeps the wealthy wealthy and the poor, the poor who are fighting for change, for a better life, are attacked or arrested for clearly practicing their First Amendment right. Businesses can use the First Amendment to claim money as speech, but we can't use it to change the system to benefit the many instead of the few. Medical insurance, like wage labor, traps us to a job. Most of our insurance is linked to our job, and many will lose access to medication if they don't have that insurance. So they can't leave their job. Insurance on a whole is a scam because we pay into something we rarely use that doesn't even fully cover everything and is also subsidized by the government, double dipping from our taxes and our insurance payments. Finally, false scarcity is created to keep us trapped. We know there's plenty of food and resources. We know we can afford free healthcare and access to affordable food and housing. It's all about funding a system that benefits the people, but it wouldn't benefit business. They need to make a profit. So they won't pass something that jeopardizes their whole industry, like our healthcare system, the most expensive healthcare system in the world, but that hardly anyone can access without going into debt. So they create false scarcity, making it seem like there's not enough to go around when we know there is. And this is all connected. So we're going to quote Willie Baptist again. He said, the interconnection of these issues, if recognized, reveals the dominant mechanisms of social control that are employed to preserve an edifice that produces the polarity of extreme wealth on one side and massive poverty on the other. I know that quote can kind of seem a little heavy-handed, but if we see how everything is connected, we find the root of our problems, which can all be connected back to the foundations of this country. This chart made by Rupa Mara, she wrote a book called Inflamed, and it basically is a deep dive into how the system and our lived experiences creates trauma and inflammation in our bodies. She's a doctor, but her chart is very helpful in explaining how this is all connected. So we have colonization of this country, which was upheld by supremacy and capitalism and has created trauma. And specifically, it shows how everything is connected, like I said. So colonization, which is when settlers destroyed the indigenous population of this land, was done because settlers believed in their superiority over the inhabitants of the land and brought capitalism to this land. She breaks down each kind of supremacy, what it creates, and how that supports capitalism and creates trauma. So white supremacy creates slavery and genocide. Slavery created cheap labor, which benefited capitalism and is how the wealth of this nation was made. Genocide allowed the settlers to take resources like land, agriculture, minerals, and wildlife that they could exploit and sell. Male supremacy, or the patriarchy, created invisible labor through women staying at home to raise children and tend the home, ensuring that at least two more people, the mother and child, need resources in a home that only has one income. That's not as true today. Most people have dual income homes, but that's how it used to be. And then it also creates femicide, domestic violence, and child abuse, which are created by the patriarchy because the patriarchy believes that women and children are subordinate to men, lower, and therefore lacking value. Finally, human supremacy, the belief that humans are superior to other living things like plants and animals, justifying ecocide or the destruction of ecosystems for the exploitation of resources, like destroying wetlands to create farmland to grow and sell crops. Everything is connected, and it all leads back to capitalism and creates trauma. That is the root cause of our problems.
I just want to add to, right, this concept here. This is a big part of why we're part of the Pennsylvania Poor People's Campaign, just the work we do as the Pennsylvania Poor People's Campaign. We come together to get out of our issue silos to fight kind of what Dr. King called the 5 interlocking evils of the war economy, systemic racism, ecological devastation, and poverty. And so we push our issues forward together because all of our issues are interconnected.
Mm-hmm. Everything plays into each other. But we can have something better. We have the power to make change. We see how people change their communities by coming together to make sure everyone is provided for, a radical divergence from our current system. It's radical love, too, that allows us to see the humanity in others and want to care for others the way we care for our families. Change comes from the bottom up. Politicians are not going to save us. They benefit from the system that oppresses us. We need to challenge the status quo and prove to each other that we don't need to be dependent on the system, but rather dependent on each other. And I love this quote from Ursula Le Guin: "We live in capitalism. Its power seems inescapable. So did the divine right of kings. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings."
Ooh, how are people feeling? We've gone through a lot so far. I know we've covered some stuff that can feel pretty bleak, but we're gonna lift up now, and we're gonna just talk about how we win. And yeah, let's get into the hopeful part of tonight's class. Yeah, so I want to start off, and this kind of ties to Haley, what you were saying. The last time that we did democracy, right? The last time that we really came together and did great things as a people and as a country was in really the 1960s and the early 70s. We organized across lines of division and we won human rights across the board, right? And public projects that are rooted in love and community, right? Civil rights, women's liberation, Medicaid and Medicare, environmental protections, right? Great public education, the arts and the sciences flourished, right? We ended war, right? And really so much more. And I guess I bring this up as well because the ruling class actually really hated this era of progress so much that they complained and called it an excess of democracy. An excess of democracy. I think that's an insane statement. That's what they thought of it, right? And I want to stress that like these wins happened not because politicians like immediately wanted to do the right thing. Really, politicians are always the last ones to cross the finish line. All of these movement wins were the result of long-term organizing, the result of movement building across kind of these manufactured lines of division, and people pushing politicians to do the right thing, right? These are the result of like not focusing on the policies of a single person, right? But was really the result of attacking the root issues in our system at its core. And like something we always say at March on Harrisburg is we really don't look to the top to save us, right? We look to our left, we look to our right, we look to our neighbors, right? We look to the people. We know what we need to change the system, right? Because we're suffering from it. We know what needs to happen. And currently, right, in our system, like we're at French Revolution levels of inequality, right? Like things are not good for people right now, and they've been bad for some time, right? But at the same time, right, we can look to movement wins that also happen in periods of intense inequality, right? And we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can look to past movements to guide us as we organize ourselves out of this situation and build something new in its place. Just wanted to say that, yeah. And there's a great graphic there that I love as well. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. And so going to the next slide here. So as March on Harrisburg, we have demands. We have a 23-point policy platform. We don't believe that there is like a silver bullet policy that fixes everything, right? It's going to take a lot to undo this corporate takeover that's been happening since the 70s, right? And so we have a 23 policy platform that kind of outlines our roadmap to democracy. And the way you can think about it, there's two main buckets. You have the money outside, right? Things like banning gifts to legislators, closing that revolving door between the public sector and private sector. And we have the people inside, right? Bringing people into the civic process, right? Early voting, enacting ranked choice voting, passing a ballot referendum. So there's a way to pass stuff not through the legislature, but you can pass stuff without the legislature. Yeah, so there's money out, people in, right? And so, but at the same time, we can really only focus on so much at once. And Haley in the next slide is going to kind of talk about one of our main money out campaigns.
So Andrea did go over this a little bit when we were talking about gifts, but we want a gift ban. We want to prevent our politicians from taking gifts and having to disclose them to the public. We are one of 3 states without a gift ban, which is insane. And 97% of the gifts that they get go unreported. So we don't even know what they're getting, how this is a conflict of interest. There is no transparency. And we actually passed the gift ban out of state committee twice in 2019 and 2021. So we have been making progress. We keep fighting. We've been fighting for, I think, 7 or 8 years now for a gift ban. And if we keep putting pressure, we keep getting organized, we keep coming out and showing that there's a lot of public support for this, it's going to pass whether they want to or not, because at the end of the day, they don't want to. They like getting gifts.
They do. Just want to add too, so currently, there's class 3 is actually like a deep dive into the gift ban. We'll talk about kind of our history with it, ways to advocate. But right now, just a little update, there are 2 gift ban bills in the House and there's one in the Senate. Leaders in neither chamber have made any statements or kind of commitments to moving them. So that is the kind of status of it now. And if you go to our website, giftban.org, we have on there some like actions that you can take, and we'll talk more about this, but pressure that you can put on those leaders. So a spectrum of tactics. So in the same way that we don't believe that there's like one silver bullet policy, we don't believe in like only using kind of one tactic or a few set of tactics. Yeah, so we use every tactic in the book to push the gift ban and other campaigns. Right. So we do everything from phone call campaigns to rallies in front of the Capitol and other places to nonviolent direct action. And as we sort of increase pushback from the legislature, we increase in tactics. And this spectrum of tactics is something that we do every session. And yeah, right. And you'll see this in like past movements too, right? Like you look at civil rights movement, you had your marches, you had your sit-ins, you had a wide variety of tactics. Like the same goes for us. We use a wide variety of things in the book to push our bills forward. So yeah. Ways to take action. Or is this you, Haley? I forgot.
I think this one's me, yeah. And then someone asked about the gift ban getting hung up. I don't know if I gave the best answer, but if you wanted to also add to that.
So where is the gift ban getting hung up? Yeah, so really the main people right now that are holding it up are leaders in the House and in the Senate. So there's really 4 people in Pennsylvania that kind of hold the most power in the legislature. You have the House Majority Leader, and then the Speaker of the House, and then you have the Senate Majority Leader, and then the Senate President. So on the House side, you have Matt Bradford, House Majority Leader, Joanna McClinton, Speaker of the House. Senate side, you have Senate Speaker or Senate President Kim Ward, and then you have the Senate Majority Leader Joe Pittman. So they are the ones who do not want the gift ban to be passed. Really, 4 people are holding it up. And just to add, yeah, so we're very much nonpartisan and politically independent. And is it a bipartisan group? Yeah, so both parties are holding up the gift ban. Both do not want it to pass.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see the type who takes gifts, leaders in both parties take gifts. There's a really great article that was written by Stephen Caruso in Spotlight PA that kind of outlines what industries give to leaders in both parties and both chambers. And I'll link that in the chat because it kind of explains exactly why they wouldn't want to pass the gift ban. Sorry, Haley.
Okay, yeah. Okay. So ways you can take action. You can write a letter to your local paper. They're called like editorials. We have classes on them for how to write them. You can flyer in your community. We do often flyer at different events. So if you do join or you're already in MarchOnHarrisburg, we can get you some flyers. Lobbying in district or virtually, we do teach people how to lobby. We have a whole lobbyist group who like go and speak to the representatives one-on-one, or they hold meetings with them so that we can try to push the gift ban. Commenting on leadership's posts. We have commented on these 4 people's posts and they ignore us every single time. They refuse to talk about a gift ban. You can donate to organize a local fundraising drive. We do take donations at March on Harrisburg, but you can donate in other ways to other organizations, or like it says, you can organize a local fundraising drive. And then we do some base building where we have base builders who will meet one-on-one with you to orient you. They will go over kind of our policy platforms, kind of ask why you want to join, all of those really great things. And it is such an intimate way to join the organization because there's no pressure. You get to meet somebody who's been with it a long time and it can answer your questions. And there's just like, it's just a great way to get to know people.
Yeah, and just also too, after this class, like our base building team will definitely reach out to people and like ask to set up a one-on-one and just talk and answer any of kind of lingering questions that we can. So watch out for those texts and emails.
And then we put together some recommended readings. We quoted twice from It's Not Enough to Be Angry by Willie Baptist. I'm pretty sure he is from PA. He works with, can you remind me, Andrea?
Yeah, National Union of the Homeless and PA Union of the Homeless. I believe also he organizes with the Nonviolent Medicaid Army as well.
And if you look up that title with his name, you can find a PDF version for free. It's probably the first link. I think it's the University of the Poor or something like that. Braiding Sweetgrass is something that Andrea and I have both read recently, and it's just a complete perspective shift for you. Like it is such like a necessary read in these times. But a lot of these other books, they either provide hope, they teach you about democracy or love for your fellow neighbor. They talk about the ways in which money is corrupting our government. Or they give you just some really good background. And then the last one on there, The Parable of the Sower, another really great fictional piece that is just also a great perspective shifter. So if anyone wants to take a picture of this, add it to your reading list.
Well, also definitely we can send this list in an email afterwards too.
Thank you.
Next class is next Tuesday at 7, and we're going to be joined by Free Speech for People, which is a national pro-democracy group, and we're going to be talking about secret spending in elections. It's going to be a really, really great class, and they've taught us so much, and I'm just excited for everyone here to learn from them. Then afterwards, kind of the second half of the class will be in June. So we'll talk about kind of the fight to ban bribes in Pennsylvania on June 10th. And then on June 17th, we're going to just talk about campaign contributions and a better way to do things, which is public campaign financing.